Hello, everybody. Hi. My name is Tosca Bruno van Vijwijken, and I'm the principal consultant at Five Oaks Consulting. I'm also the outgoing director of the Transnational NGO Initiative here at the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. And today I'm saying hello to Lan Mercado. Thank you, Lan, for allowing me to interview you for the series Leading with Meaning. Mm-hmm. And I'll ask you something about what kind of meaning you derive from leadership towards the end. Mm-hmm. So we're going to do this short Facebook Live interview. Lan is the Asia Regional Director for Oxfam International.
That's right.
Based in Manila, and your team is virtually distributed throughout the region.
Yes,
right?
Yes. We don't have a physical office.
You do not, and you're going into some pretty interesting directions with your new regional strategy, which is one of the reasons why I was excited to interview you. Of course, many of you know that Oxfam is one of the most influential and also big brand NGO. But Lan is here at Syracuse University as a visiting fellow, a TNGO fellow, and she is here researching how Oxfam in the region of Asia has to change its role, strategy, its partnership approaches, and perhaps other aspects too that you'll tell me about, in view of the fact that the civic space, so the legal and political space for NGOs, both national NGOs and other civil society actors and international NGOs, has been shifting, has been changing, and for the more progressive NGOs, it frequently has become more and more limited. Governments are more and more clamping down on these actors in civil society. So, here we go. So, Lan, for the few people on this earth who do not know about Oxfam, I'm just joking, tell us what Oxfam is all about.
So Oxfam is an international NGO, but I'd really like to say that what Oxfam is all about is helping to empower people so that they can fight the injustice of inequality and poverty.
Themselves. I hear you say. Yes. So focused on empowering citizens to be what Oxfam calls active citizens,
right,
in order to fight not just poverty but also injustice, right, and power distribution, where it's against those who are poor, otherwise discriminated, etc.
Yeah. So because there is injustice in the inequality that unfolds,
right,
despite economic progress. So the leaving behind of millions of people is an injustice.
And that is particularly strongly the case in Asia, obviously, right, where you have seen a lot of economic growth, yet also inequality.
Yes, deepening levels of inequality. And it's not just income inequality, it's also inequality in terms of opportunities, inequality in terms of outcomes. There's also inequality that continues to be driven by gender and ethnicity, and even by religion. So I think it's important that while the most, headline part of inequality that Oxfam works on is income or wealth inequality. In Asia, that actually intersects with all the other dimensions of inequality.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit about the research that you've been doing here with the help of students and faculty at the Maxwell School at Syracuse University about that shrinking civic space. Why is that important to Oxfam Asia, and how will you use this research strategically as well as operationally once you return?
So it's important for us, civic space is important for us because that's at the heart of our theory of change. We think that the combination of active citizenship and effective governance is what produces the positive change that people need to happen in their lives in a sustainable way. And active citizenship is expressed in many circumstances through community-based organizations, non-government organizations, and other forms of organizations as
Social
well, including
faith-based
social
organizations.
That's right, even professional groups, trade unions, etc.
Yeah.
Secondly, Oxfam's business model has always been to work with partners. And because the topics that Oxfam's interested in around the different dimensions of poverty and inequality are usually topics that will necessitate challenging the power structures, the political capture of institutions, then it's very important to protect those spaces so that those voices that challenge how wealth and influence is concentrated in the hands of a few, and therefore, how things happen do not redound to the benefit of poor people, both men and women, that needs to be protected. But I think what I've learned from the time that I had spent here is we also cannot be simplistic about our understanding of how civic space is changing. And we have to be much more attuned to how civic space has new actors in it, and how we can actually build common ground, so that it's not just, and that will really require a rethinking of how we support our existing partners, but also a rethinking of how we build bridges.
And who you even partner with.
Exactly. So that brings me to our strategy. And I'm really glad about what I've learned here, because I think our it has given me much more confidence about our strategy, that our strategy will be useful.
I see.
So a big pillar of our strategy is data justice and digital technology. And of course, digital technology and innovation is a two-edged sword. I'm not sure if that's how it's called, no?
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
So we want to but there's no denying the fact that digital technology will change the way societies function.
It's already
changing that.
Yeah.
And it will also change the way civil society actors operate.
Yes.
So it's not confined to labor or the economy or
companies.
Exactly.
Right. Or governments.
So I think we need to make sure that our digital strategy actually supports the strengthening of that civic space. That digital innovation enables the exchange of information and ideas amongst people who would not normally talk to each other. And Oxfam might have a role in facilitating and convening those spaces for dialogue. That's one. I
see.
Secondly, another big pillar of our strategy is engaging the private sector. And I think that's become, to me, in my mind, even more relevant now, because in many countries across Asia and maybe across the world, I'm not sure about other regions, the private sector has become the preferred development actor. And so by engaging with the private sector, especially business leaders who also want to explore new business models that respond not only to their profit interests.
Well, some do, right?
Some do, exactly. And that's who we need to identify.
Right, and so the skill of how to identify that in a rigorous way, for instance, is an important skill.
Yes, but by doing that, by partnering with the private sector, whom we normally would not work with, would actually help change the narrative.
What narrative?
The narrative about Oxfam and our partners. That we confine ourselves to ourselves.
To our peers.
To our peers.
To actors like ourselves.
To like-minded organizations.
Yes.
So I think if we reach out to the private sector, particularly private sector in Asia, because of course Oxfam does a lot of work on private sector influencing and engagement, but one of the things I often say is that we know more about the northern brands than we do about Asian multinational corporations.
Which these days are also have an incredibly big footprint, consumer basis, and influence.
Yes.
Across the world.
Across the world, precisely. And given that Asia is the rising economic power, if it isn't yet.
It is already.
It is already. So it's important for us to recognize that the private sector is a legitimate actor with whom we need to engage.
Yeah.
And perhaps Oxfam's role is, again, building the linkages between our traditional partners and the private sector on common interests.
And maybe, let me say one thought, and then I want to move to the next question. Maybe, in terms of common ground, also finding out whether the private sector has any stake, any incentive in preserving a certain quality of civic space.
Yeah, exactly.
That it's directly and indirectly relevant to them, not just to you as civic actors, is one thought.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, and that actually, I think that appreciation for civic space will happen if we engage with them. And until they come to know what civil society actors do, then there's always that doubt, maybe even a certain level of mistrust.
Yes, absolutely. And you talked in our discussion just before this interview about that trust building and the softer forms of influencing, right? Yeah. Now, so you've already talked a little bit about these couple of important strands in Oxfam's new regional strategy for Asia. So let me move on to your individual leadership approaches. Okay, so I'm pivoting a bit. I'm interested, amongst others, in gender and leadership, and would like to ask you this. So some people say that women are more prone to have certain leadership traits than men typically do. Other people, and so I'm thinking about things like interpersonal communication skills, empathy, collaborative skills, interest in shared leadership or pushing leadership down across the organization, etc. Other people, however, reject that statement and saying that it essentializes women. It reduces them to their biology, so that it's not warranted and that it's actually potentially dangerous. What's your observation on this?
I think those leadership traits are not monopolized by women. Having said that, women are socially constructed to play particular roles and to play it in a certain way.
Yes.
Right? So I think the gender dimension still comes out in the way we perform our roles and the leadership behavioral competencies that we manifest, that we demonstrate in the workplace. A lot of that is influenced by our social construction.
Yes.
Yeah. But I will stop at saying that therefore women are better managers than men.
You will not want to go there.
I will not want to go there. Because I have seen male leaders, male managers who are empathetic, who are good listeners, who cultivate collaboration, who create an open and safe space for others to participate. In the same way that I have seen women do that as well. So a lot of it, I think, is related to how an individual has learned these behaviors and brings that into the workplace. But also how the workplace, how the organization informs the behavior while already in the workplace. Because, and I think this is where we have to really talk about making the values and the culture in an organization very explicit. And providing the right environment for those values to be upheld and practiced in everyday work life.
Yeah. So you're saying, of course, that environment also strongly influences the extent to which these types of leadership traits that we just held up are actually celebrated and expected,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
and we should be very clear about which behaviors are unacceptable.
Right, right. So pivoting once again, but still on the topic of your individual leadership and your reflections on that. So can you share something of what you've learned from past failures in your leadership? You do not have to mention the examples, the cases of failure, but what you learned from them.
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is to value people. And that sometimes...
What do you mean by that?
Sometimes we see people in the team, in our staff, in light of the work that they need to do.
Instrumentalist?
Yes. And I've fallen into that trap. With certain expectations, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But I think what I learned from an experience in managing bad performance is I was not looking at it in the right way, and that in fact my role as the manager or the leader in that particular team is to find a way to help people perform at their best. And if they make mistakes, it's not so much to exact always accountability, but also to provide a safety net so that people feel safe about making mistakes and that they feel safe about owning up to those mistakes to me, because I will not be the judge and jury, but I will be a mentor instead.
Yeah.
So that's one of my big lessons. The other thing, not so much from a mistake, but a success that I still need to figure out how we did, is building teams, building virtual teams.
I would love to have a
Yes.
separate conversation with you, because that's such an interesting topic.
Yeah.
We must make sure before you leave that we have a chat about that. But yeah, tell me if you. We need to. I'm looking at the clock, and we need to bring this to a close in about 1 or 2 minutes. So tell me, are you able to tell me one thing you've learned about virtual team leadership, or?
Well, it can work.
Okay.
It can work, provided that again, it's you create an environment of good relationships.
Up front, you mean
upfront?
before you become virtual team?
No, it
or?
happens in the process.
In the process. Okay.
But I think what drives the team building process, even if it's a virtual team, is having very clear objectives that you share as a team, and individuals knowing what's their role to contribute to that objective.
Yeah.
But also having regular contact, even if it's not about work. Opening up spaces for personal conversations.
Yeah, personal bonding, the way you would do in a
Yeah.
face-to-face environment.
Yeah, but it needs to be combined with a few face-to-face meetings, because not everyone will be satisfied with just virtual relationships, and sometimes you do need that physical interaction.
Yeah, exactly. Well, fascinating. I'm glad you touched briefly upon that, and we must think about how to.
I've offered to write a short case study.
I was going to say to have you elicit some more reflections on that. So let me move to my last question, and maybe if you can answer this in 1 to 2 sentences. What does leading with meaning imply for you in your context in Oxfam in Asia?
Meaning for me comes from the value of the work to society. Because I think my particular mission as an individual has always been what am I contributing, and Oxfam provides the vehicle through which I can do that.
Yeah.
But the other meaning for me is helping people within Oxfam.
So at the 2 levels.
Yes. So I derive a lot of fulfillment, a lot of self-satisfaction in carving out spaces, in coaching people, in helping people rise to their best potential,
in being developmental, as some people. You get meaning out of developing people or helping people develop. Yes, so those are the two. So the meaning comes from the societal value that you and your teams hopefully create, as well as from internal helping people develop. Well, I'm sorry that we have to bring it to a close. This has been fascinating. I would have loved to do this a bit longer, but for now we will say goodbye to our colleagues all over the world, and thank you so much for this interview. I appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the chance to talk a little bit about Oxfam in Asia.
And it's been so super to have you here as a TNGO fellow.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody.